following is a production of Cary TV, the Town of Cary's government access channel.
Meeting of the Cary Town Council, and at this time I'll recognize Councilmember Lou for our ceremonial opening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is to adopt the agenda. We do have a change. The applicant for 19 REZ 23 has withdrawn its petition and has asked for a waiver of the one-year waiting period for a subsequent petition. Thus, staff requests that tonight's public hearing item 19 REZ 23 be removed from the agenda and that a request for the waiver be on the consent agenda for, we're talking about 107 West Park Street. So if you're here to speak, we want to hear you, and you can speak at Public Speaks Out, and you can also send comments. This is not actually a bad thing, and a lot of times it's a good thing. It means the applicant wants to make a change, and changes are made usually for the better. So this sounds like a good idea to me, and I hope it does to my colleagues. But I want you to know, if you're here to speak on this item, that you can still speak in Public Speaks Out. However, we will not have the public hearing. Having said that, is there a motion to adopt the agenda as revised?
So moved.
I'll second it.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if it's a staff question or not, but I thought our practice has been to wait the year, and if somebody wants to come in before the year, they ask for a special request, and then we make that motion at that time.
This one's a little unique in that it's not going to come to us for a public hearing. So they recognize that there are some issues that they need to address, possibly include some conditions. So they're just electing to stop, not come for the public hearing, not go through the rest of the process, and start over, but they want the waiver to go and start over.
The request then is because they haven't even really started.
Correct.
I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And now we move to recognitions, reports, and presentations. We have no items under that this evening, so we'll go right to Public Speaks Out. We've included instructions for speaking at Public Speaks Out on the printed agenda. And if you'd like to speak, I would ask that you take a seat in the rows to my right that are shown as reserved and follow the instructions on the agenda. Public Speaks Out speakers have 3 minutes each for their comments, and you may speak on any topic as long as it's not a public hearing, and that works to your advantage because you get more time to speak at a public hearing. There's a 3-minute time limit, and that will be enforced, not to be rude, but to be fair to all of our speakers. There's a timer on the podium, And when the green light turns into a yellow light, that means you have 30 seconds remaining. And when the yellow light turns into a flashing red light, at that point, I'm going to interrupt you. Not trying to be rude, but trying to be fair to all of our speakers. And I'll ask you to immediately conclude your comments. To have an efficient public speaks out item on our agenda, I ask that if you're here with a group, that you have a spokesperson for the group to reduce repetitive comments. Also, if you'd like to speak after the speaker that is currently speaking, I would ask that you take a stance over there in the steps. That helps us know that we have another speaker and also makes our public speaks out item go a little bit more efficiently. I thank everyone in the audience for understanding that this is a business meeting. Please do not applaud, make remarks from your seats, or anything else that may distract from this meeting. Having said all that, now is the time for Public Speaks Out, and I would invite our first speaker forward. Anyone to speak?
My name is George McDowell. May it please your honor, esteemed members of council, Mr. Stiegel, Ms. Simpson, and Ms. Johnson. BlackRock, Inc. is a global investment management firm based in New York. It is by far the largest such firm in the world, deciding and directing where over $7,000 billion will be invested for the benefit of pension funds, insurance companies, banks, and private wealth that it serves. Lawrence Fink is the majority shareholder of BlackRock and its CEO. Each year, Mr. Fink sends a letter to CEOs of the major companies of the world. 5 years ago, when Fink's yearly letter was received, he was, by the recipients, collectively deemed a raving lunatic. 4 years ago, his status was downgraded to merely that of a dangerous radical. 3 years ago, he became an object of intense intellectual curiosity and discussion. 2 years ago, he was considered to be one whose ideas might be worthwhile to consider, and last year, he was accepted as one whose ideas might just benefit our race. The definition of a corporation has been, since the memory of man runneth not to the contrary, an organization charged only with maximizing shareholder profit. Mr. Fink realized that while this policy was beneficial to some, it was, in net effect, ruinous for all, including the some. He proposed expanding the definition of a corporation so that the well-being of its employees, to include both paying a wage that would allow them to work in the communities they served and to have access to health care, was required. More radically, he proposed that the corporate rape of the earth be stopped, that corporate activities that cause and increase climate change be halted, and that corporations must actively involve themselves in bettering the environment of the communities in which they operate. The gravamen of his thesis is that wealth that accrues from unsustainable industry is illusory profit. In August of 2019, the CEOs of the 181 largest companies that operate in the United States, members of the Business Roundtable, unanimously adopted Lawrence Fink's ideas and issued an official redefinition of the purposes of a corporation. Lawrence Fink also writes a yearly letter to clients who have entrusted their vast wealth to him to invest. The radical and revolutionary nature of BlackRock's revised investment strategy is shown in this blunt and pointed paragraph from his 2020 letter. Quote, "Thermal coal is significantly carbon intensive and highly exposed to regulation because of its environmental impacts. We do not believe that long-term economic rationale justifies continued investment in this sector. As a result, we are removing from our investment portfolios the public securities, both debt and equity, of companies that generate their revenues from coal production, a goal that we will accomplish by the middle of 2020.
Thank you.
I have more, but
You can leave a copy if you'd like with the town clerk. She'll make sure we can see it.
thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Mayor, council members, members of staff. My name is Alistair McGregor. I live at 150 Shad Lane, and I'm here to talk about 19 Res 26. It's a proposed development at the corner of Mount Pisgah Church Road and New Hope Church Road. I understand that this may be perceived as early, but the planning for this development has been going for 6 months, if not longer. The message I want to convey is that the development plans are moving in the wrong direction. The process of building the joint Cary-Chatham County plan was long and I know arduous. However, it stands as a solid framework against which to measure ongoing and future growth decisions. To the dismay of residents in the neighborhood, towards the end of that process, an island of higher density arose in the midst of several established, very low density residential neighborhoods. This island is at the western edge. It's at the intersection of Mount Pisgah Church Road and New Hope Church Road, and it straddles the 1 mile boundary from Jordan Lake. Not long after the adoption of that plan, the joint plan, a development was proposed for this site. It was targeted for the maximum allowable density and made no accommodation for this 1 mile boundary. The proposal was subsequently withdrawn. Between August and November of 2019, a revised plan for the development was proposed for this same property. Relative to the original one, this application was more refined and appeared to be headed in a better direction. Some key points: 1.8 dwelling units per acre in the TRCU portion, age restricted, single story, and 7,000 square foot lots because older people don't really need that much space. What was presented at the neighborhood meeting on January 8th was different. 165 lots, which equates to basically 2 per acre, no age restriction, multi-story, and of course still 7,000 square foot lots. If the joint plan guiding principles still stand, no more than 1 dwelling per acre within 1 mile of Lake Jordan, preserve rural character for the bulk of this area while allowing for balanced growth, protect property rights of residents and landowners, I am one, both, focus the most intense land uses close to the eastern boundary, and preserve key open space, especially where needed to protect water quality. If the joint plan guiding principles still stand, then the direction that this development proposal is heading needs to change.
Thank you, sir.
That's it. Thank you.
Next speaker, please. Anyone else to speak at Public Speaks Out? Seeing no one, we'll move on from Public Speaks Out to our consent agenda. For the benefit of people watching our meeting on TV, I'm going to take a moment to review our consent agenda items. Please keep in mind that one vote approves all of these items. On the consent agenda, we have minutes. Go Cary Title VI Program Update. Added during the adoption of the agenda, the request for a waiver of 1-year waiting period for 107 West Park Street. Would council members like any of these items pull for discussion? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
There's a motion.
Second.
And the second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And that takes us to public hearings. The same rules apply for public hearings that applied for Public Speaks Out, with one exception. Speakers now have 5 minutes each for their comments. Our first public hearing and only public hearing now is 5.1, the Act 14 Land Development Ordinance Amendments, and Transportation and Facilities Director Jerry Jensen will introduce the item, and Development Manager Rob Wilson will give a staff report, and council will not take action on this rezoning, on this LDO tonight. LDO amendments tonight. Instead, it's going to go to our Planning and Zoning Board for their review and future recommendation, and it will return to us at a later date. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Jensen.
All right, great. Good evening, Council. Act 14 has 3 topic areas that will be presented tonight, but I want to be brief and introduce item A, which is the amendments for townhouse streets and landscaping. We are very pleased that we can bring to you proposed changes regarding on how we ensure attractive and well-maintained townhome communities in Cary for our future. We are grateful to this council that the Streets Task Force was able to share their journey and interact with you at last year's annual retreat. And tonight we're back to show you our finished work. Work on private streets has been an effort that required us to think and act differently, and I think we succeeded in doing just that. Nearly 24 staff experts from every department within Cary committed themselves to work on the Streets Task Force. They challenged each other along every step along the way, embracing collaboration and breaking down long-held silos and individual department held values and standard practices. Externally, we needed to engage and collaborate with developers, design professionals, HOA property managers, to help build and shape support for the work being developed by the task force. We have developed recommendations that will produce better outcomes for developers and future townhome owners. Our recommendations will allow developers and designers to achieve higher levels of creativity rather than being overly prescriptive with regulation. As a result, we will see well-planned and well-maintained townhome communities. The work has been long, as you know, but it hasn't been easy. But we learned some valuable lessons along the way that I want to share with you. First, we must put each of ourselves in each other's shoes to make sure that we build upon all perspectives. Secondly, we must encourage everyone to break down barriers and to achieve greater buy-in through collaboration. And finally, we must build trust with one another that will produce meaningful and lasting relationships. A big thank you to our town manager for creating an environment and culture to do just that kind of great work. And with that, I'm going to please to hand this off to Rob Wilson, who's going to drive you through Act 14.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'm presenting an overview of Act 14, a round of proposed amendments to the Town Code and to the Land Development Ordinance as part of our ongoing implementation of the Cary Community Plan. Act 14 is comprised of 3 groups of amendments, which I'll be referring to as items. Item A consists of amendments recommended by the Streets Task Force for townhouse developments. Item B includes 3 amendments proposed to improve consistency with state law. And item C consists of 3 technical and minor amendments. Item A is a group of amendments to require all new townhouse streets and alleys to be publicly owned and maintained, and improve requirements for canopy trees and landscaping. As you know, a staff task force has been working on this issue, and we met with you to update you on our progress at last year's retreat. Working off the momentum that we got from the retreat, we finished developing our recommendations and re-engaged with our external stakeholders to get their feedback. The group included members of the professional engineering and design community, HOA property managers, and actual townhome builders. Their feedback was positive, and we made some adjustments based on what we heard. So we've achieved consensus and are before you tonight with our final recommendations. The task force's recommendations revolve around 3 key themes: making sure that all future townhouse developments are built with public streets and alleys, providing additional parking and design flexibility, and finally, improving aesthetics through better landscaping. It's important to note that fixing townhouse streets will involve changes to 3 documents: the Land Development Ordinance, or LDO, the Community Appearance Manual, or CAM, and the Town Standard Specifications and Details Manual. The Council must approve changes to the LDO and the CAM, while staff may administratively update the Standard Specifications and Details Manual. To quickly walk through our key themes at a high level, first, we need to make changes in all 3 documents to support public streets and alleys. Second, we need to make changes to support design flexibility. These changes include new street cross-sections specifically designed for townhouse developments. We need to update our block length and driveway spacing requirements, as well as our curb requirements for alleys. We need to update our local street geometry requirements, which will maintain safety while increasing design flexibility. We need to make changes to accommodate perpendicular parking. As desired by townhouse communities, the actual spaces will be just outside the right-of-way so HOAs can continue to regulate them themselves. Finally, we recommend changes to support parallel parking and make sure that guest spaces are appropriately located with relation to the units they serve. Our final theme is improving landscaping. This will be accomplished by tweaking our setback requirements, limiting the number of units in a row, and increasing the spacing between buildings to provide better spaces for canopy trees. Finally, we also propose to add new townhouse-specific landscaping requirements to the Community Appearance Manual. As previously noted, these changes are accomplished by updating multiple documents. The Council would need to approve changes to the LDO and the CAM to support public streets, improve guest parking, add design flexibility, and create townhouse-specific landscaping requirements. And if the Council chooses to approve these amendments to the LDO and the CAM, the staff will administratively update the town's standard specifications and details manual to coordinate with these changes. Updates would include requiring all future townhouse streets and alleys to be public, adding street cross-sections, allowing perpendicular parking, and adding more design flexibility. In closing, there is some give and take here. The amendments proposed to require more space between buildings for canopy trees. At the same time, the recommended new public townhouse street right-of-way is 20% smaller than our currently applicable public right-of-way. We do believe that on balance, the proposed amendments deliver a win-win scenario for everyone involved, and the community will achieve better outcomes, including public townhouse street maintenance and more attractive and sustainable townhouse neighborhoods. Item B includes 3 amendments that would improve consistency with state law. These topics include temporary signs in the right-of-way, the approval criteria for rezonings, and opportunities for variances. These items are explained in further detail in the staff report that is before you tonight. Item C includes 3 minor and technical amendments regarding accessory building setbacks, the process for correction of zoning map errors, and board references. These items are also discussed in your staff report. The next step for these amendments following tonight's public hearing will be referring them to the Planning and Zoning Board for a recommendation, after which they will return to Council for a decision. Once this process is complete, staff will turn its focus to our legacy neighborhoods, the term we use for our existing townhouse communities that were built with private streets. Over the next 12 to 18 months, we'll visit these neighborhoods to better understand the challenges they face. We'll conduct infrastructure assessments and work on developing options to share with Council. And we anticipate there will be some experimentation and pilot projects along the way. This concludes staff's presentation on Act 14. Following the public hearing, we will be available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Now's the time for public hearing for Act 14 Land Development Ordinance Amendments, and I would invite our first speaker forward.
Good evening. My name is Kate Walden, and I'm here representing MI Homes. We just have a brief report or comment that we'd like to make about this amendment. Before I begin, we want to thank the staff for the effort that went into revising this proposal. We appreciate the time and the thoughtfulness and also the opportunity to be able to contribute. As you may know, MI Homes has built several successful townhome communities in Cary over the last several years, and we've appreciated the flexibility of the design for the community, and also know that it did lead to some difficulties as the project moved forward. Therefore, a standardized design approach similar to other public streets, this adds a degree of certainty to the process, and that makes it smoother and more predictable for everyone involved, staff, public, and the developer. In particular, the standards proposed reflect and improve upon many of the townhome street features that MI Homes already employs in our communities, and therefore, we absolutely support the amendment. Finally, as noted in the presentation, this is going to assist take the burden off of HOAs for maintenance for roads and eventual replacement, which in turn is better for residents and everyone involved. Thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Ed Tang with Withers Ravenel. I'm not here to present a case before you tonight, but actually I'm here to lend my support to the recommendations that the staff presented regarding item A on the public townhome streets. I think what we have tonight is a great start to a very balanced approach. Over the last 18 months, as we've heard from you all, that we don't want any more private townhome streets. We've heard that loud and clear, and as you know, all the rezoning cases recently, there have been conditions being offered to guarantee that there will be public townhome streets. But during that period, it was sort of a period of uncertainty because there is no standard. So we have been working with staff on different projects to try to come up with what that is for that unique project, as each one is. As the process became clear, and I applaud the staff for working the last 18 months on this, and they have engaged people like myself in the engineering community, but also, as was mentioned, HOA management companies, our clients, developers that build these townhome communities, and they've gone out and visited the communities that we're talking about to see what the real world issues are out there. And as I understand, they've also had lots of internal spirited discussions, which is good. And as Mr. Jensen mentioned, this builds a spirit of collaboration and also breaks down those barriers to be able to come up with a great solution. So I'd like to thank the staff and the Streets Task Force for their work in leading this effort and coming up with a standard. It puts a lot of predictability in what we do and what we present in front of you, and so that it levels that playing field. I look forward to seeing this amendment go forward to the Planning Board for their recommendation and back to you all for hopefully an approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tang. Anyone else to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing, open it up to council members for questions or comment.
I'd just like to say thank you to the staff members. I mean, this has been a complex problem that's plagued all of us as long as we've been on the council. So it's impressive to find out that there's 24 people who've, dug deep on this and, came about it with an empathetic and collaborative and trusting manner so that they could bring stakeholders together. To have MI Homes come up here and talk and say, yeah, we're okay with this is impressive. So I'm very pleased with the direction that we're going.
I totally agree, and this is the second time. I think stormwater was the first time, and this is the second time that you guys put your heads together and came up with a good solution, even though it's not approved yet.
Probably have good solutions more than twice.
Yeah, but I mean, really tackling difficult problems, I guess is what I'm really trying to say. And it's really hard to come up with a solution that people like or will accept, but like she said, having developers or developer representatives come up here and speak in favor of what you've done so far. And I know from a citizen point of view that this is going to be appealing as well. The HOA is not having to worry about streets. It sounds like a great solution. So I look forward to hearing what the Planning and Zoning Board has to say. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
Well, the only other thing that I would say is I remember the first time on council, one of the first calls I got was after a snowfall. And it was a constituent wondering why all the rest of the streets were plowed instead of hers. And she lived in a townhome community. And I was absolutely certain that we had just missed her. Yeah. Unaware of the difference in, when you're new to council, unaware of the difference between private roads, except for the fact that I was a HOA homeowner and recently paved some private roads. It just hadn't occurred to me that the length of time it takes from having these discussions at the table, oh, we really don't want any more private roads, to actually this amazing adaptive proposal, which I think is exactly the way that we've seen the way that all of staff works now. It's not here's the problem and here's the solution. It's here's the problem, but do we really understand the problem? And who else, as you said, who else stands in those shoes? Who knows the problem as well, and bringing them to the table to help participate as stakeholders. I think that's a real coup to all of you, and taking something that was talked about at this table and coming up with a solution is really, a proposed solution is really, remarkable, and you all should be very proud.
Mr. Stiegel.
I'm just, I just love my job so much, and I just feel such immense pride. I'm just so proud of you. Like, I mean, it really is overwhelming. I'm just so proud of you guys. I mean, exceeded everyone's expectations. I know that we share a desire to really reflect how much we appreciate and admire the council, and they create such a positive environment for these things to happen. It's so much more than the tone that I'm setting. The entire team, the atmosphere, and the environment encourages, take your time, do it right, keep digging as much time as you need, and I just feel such immense pride, and I'm so grateful to be able to serve you and work with you guys every day. And I look in these chambers, and it's like, man, you guys are just the best. And thank you so much. We're so proud. Great work.
Thank you.
All right, anybody want to try to follow that up?
And I went before him.
Those were my exact words.
All right, this will go to our Planning and Zoning Board, and we'll hear what they have to say, and it'll come back to us in a future date. Thank you all so much for where we are today, and look forward to seeing this back. Okay, well, now our second public hearing was changed or eliminated at the beginning of our meeting, so we move to discussion items, and our only discussion item is the 2020 Street Improvement Bid Award, and Transportation Engineer Amir Nazarati will present this item, and council may take action.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm really excited to be here to talk more about streets. The Imagine Cary Community Plan identified the importance of a well-maintained transportation network. Our citizens reinforced the ideas of the plan by approving the Shaping Cary's Tomorrow bond, allowing us to put these policies into action. The $2 million appropriated from bonds in November are an important funding source this year, allowing the Street Improvements Project to put our bond money to work. Yearly appropriations out of the $14 million in approved bond funding will help keep our streets in good condition. A well-maintained transportation network reduces vehicle maintenance, improves neighborhood aesthetics, improves safety due to new pavement markings and ADA upgrades, and overall yields future cost-saving benefits. Due to favorable construction pricing and various funding sources, including the bonds, this year we put together a plan to repave the most mileage over the past 4 years. The continued support of street maintenance has kept our streets in good condition. Questions and concerns from citizens are inherent with the Street Improvements Project, since we're working on residential streets, near homes, on streets that citizens use the most and have a personal connection with. We are working with 311 to provide up-to-date and accurate construction information to empower citizen advocates to answer these questions. We are excited that the launch of 311 will allow us to be more efficient, provide better service, and track data to make our program better in the future. This year, we received 5 bids with competitive pricing, where the difference between the lowest and third lowest bidder was only around $75,000. Staff recommends council award the base bid plus bid alternates 1, 2, and 3 for the construction of the FY 2020 Street Improvements Project to Blythe Construction for $6,535,919.50. Work is scheduled to start this spring and should be completed by the winter. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions from council members? Comments? The only comment I would like to make, and you can affirm or deny, is not all streets in Cary are ours to maintain. A lot of our citizens don't realize that. Mm-hmm. They go, you're talking about they're in great shape and there's a pothole on Cary Parkway. And that's a state maintained road. And we do have a website that shows what's maintained by the state and what's maintained by the town. But I just wanted to point that out since I'm usually the recipient of those complaints. But we do an excellent job, and our standards are so much higher in our neighborhoods and in the streets we maintain. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
I have a comment. As you're working with Blythe, can you emphasize with them from the very beginning the importance of being respectful to people's lawns as they're going in and doing the ADA compliance modifications and any kind of street stuff nearby? I mean, I received one call from a cul-de-sac where the last company that we were working with last summer, there was just a lot of asphalt left behind, and the neighbors were getting out and sweeping it up. And then yards that were being kind of torn up and never put back together again.
Okay,
So
yeah.
if, we really need to kind of be a little bit more aggressive at the beginning to make sure that we're protecting people's private property as we're going in and
Okay.
putting in those sidewalks.
No, I appreciate the feedback. Yes, we'll definitely address that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it our next meeting where we're going to introduce Brian Hayes, and we have actually Lori got to meet Brian today. The next council meeting, based upon council feedback as related, I think in particular to the utility companies, Google, us, we have Brian Hayes working under Paul Webster's direction on focusing and managing our interactions with utility companies and our citizens, just focusing on that.
Okay.
And so when it comes to the right-of-way or that kind of, because like a mirror and they're managing the overall project, it's difficult for them to give that same level of attention. And so Brian, who's exceptional at customer service, is serving as that liaison, focusing on just that area, and really, as he was sharing with Lori and I today, making a lot of very upset people a lot happier by the time it's over.
Okay.
So that should make a big difference, Jennifer, on that
Okay, I think
issue in
that's
particular.
really good. I mean, I know at one point we had a turf maintenance guy who was like affiliated with our park
Yeah,
system.
yeah.
I mean, it might even be worthwhile if we still have that employee to send them around to the sites that had the ADA compliance over the last year and see what has happened and maybe make recommendations to staff about how it can be reconciled. Because it's not right for somebody to have a pristine lawn and then have it trashed because of a sidewalk modification.
Yeah, we can provide additional detail on that when we present the program I just talked about at our next council meeting.
Cool.
Yeah, Brian, hopefully 3-in-1 too can help route those things to the correct people, and we can address them more efficiently and quicker. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just putting down ryegrass when you've torn up somebody's,
Zoysia.
yeah, in an area that's like 10 feet by 5 feet, and then you put down a bunch of ryegrass seeds, you're kind of like, yeah, it's not the same, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, one thing that I thought was really interesting, the staff report, and I wanted to make sure I had the right number. We're actually doing, $7.7 million worth of repairs, right? Because that's what was originally appropriated. But this bid is 6.5 million. So that means we have an extra 1.2 million?
Well, the
Fees
7.7 includes like
The POW
planning.
bill and,
Well, it includes other things like planning, design, and the construction admin part of it, and some other preventive maintenance things we do.
right. So it's actually, I mean, we're appropriating the 6.5 million, but it's actually the entire activity is about 7.7 million?
Yes.
Other questions and comments? If not,
You got an odd question that I probably should know the answer and I don't. But are there repercussions if somebody does damage to a street, let's say above normal wear and tear? I've observed some newly paved areas, and then like a tree company comes in and they use it for footing and they just gouge it like crazy. And I'm just curious, more than anything, is that just considered like the cost of doing business with roads? And and there was a situation once where they left the cable running and just gouged the street.
Yeah.
And usually we go out and fix it when it's brought to our attention, but is it ever worth? Am I on the wrong track here, or is that just something?
No, I understand I know. I get what you're saying. I think those are code enforcement things we can look into. Utility companies, certainly they are responsible for repairing those things because they have agreements with us, and hopefully Brian can help out with that.
Okay.
Part of it,
That's probably the biggest stuff.
we have to see them do it, right? That certainly does happen. There's one right in front of my house. And you have to witness it. If it is one of the major contractors, they want to be pretty responsible because lots of times they do work for us, or in some way we are connected to them. But that certainly does happen, Jack.
Yeah.
And it's just like a matter of anything else. It's about,
Well, it's good to know that we have
having to be
those
witnessed.
relationships and that on
Yeah.
a lot of those situations.
Yeah.
And, the two I have in mind clearly were one-offs of somebody that was just not very responsible.
There's a lot of subs out
Okay.
there now, and that becomes a challenge.
I appreciate the perspective. Thank you.
other questions or comments? Or I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the bid award for the transportation FY 2020 street improvements plan. Does it have to say the exact number? No? Okay.
A second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That concludes the regular session portion of our meeting, and I would entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Pursuant to GS 143-318-11A 1, 5, and 3, I move that we hold a closed session to instruct the town staff concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the town in negotiating the price and material terms of contract or proposed contract for acquisition of property owned by Robertson Family, 338 Ernest Jones Road, Apex, North Carolina, to consult with attorneys employed by and or retained by the town in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorneys and the town, and to prevent the disclosure of information that is made privileged or confidential by GS 132 1.2 and or 143-318-10E.
Second. Motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and we're now going into closed session.
Sean, this is minor, but in my neighborhood, the last couple that we used last year.
Being our meeting, we have no other business this evening. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There's a motion.
Second.
And a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and we are adjourned.
So moved.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.